zɑːr or Tsar is a title used to designate certain Slavic monarchs as supreme rulers. As a system of government in the Tsardom of Russia and Russian Empire, it is known as Tsarist autocracy, or Tsarism. The term is derived from the Latin word Caesar, which was intended to mean emperor in the European medieval sense of the term, a ruler with the same rank as a Roman emperor, withholding it by the approval of another emperor or a supreme ecclesiastical official. It was usually considered by Western Europeans to be equivalent to king, or to be somewhat in between a royal and imperial rank. Occasionally, the word could be used to designate other, secular, supreme rulers. In Asia and Russia, the imperial connotations of the term were blurred with time, due to the medieval translations of the Bible, and, by the 19th century, it had come to be viewed as an equivalent of king. Tsar was the official title in the following states: First Bulgarian Empire, in 913–1018. Second Bulgarian Empire, in 1185–1396. Serbian Empire, in 1346–1371. Tsardom of Russia, in 1547–1721. Tsardom of Bulgaria, in 1908–1946. The first ruler to adopt the title Tsar was Simeon I of Bulgaria. Simeon II, the last Tsar of Bulgaria, is the last person to have borne the title Tsar, as well as being the last surviving person to do so, meaning in Slavic languages. The title Tsar is derived from the Latin title for the Roman emperors, Caesar, in comparison to the corresponding Latin word imperator. The Byzantine Greek term basileus was used differently depending on whether it was in a contemporary political context or in a historical or biblical context. In the history of the Greek language, basileus had originally meant something like potentate. It had gradually approached the meaning of king in the Hellenistic period, and it came to designate emperor after the inception in the Roman Empire. As a consequence, Byzantine sources continued to call the biblical and ancient kings basileus, even when that word had come to mean emperor when referring to contemporary monarchs. As the Greek basileus was consistently rendered as Tsar in Slavonic translations of Greek texts, the dual meaning was transferred into Church Slavonic. Thus, Tsar was not only used as an equivalent of Latin imperator, but was also used to refer to biblical rulers and ancient kings. For this ambiguity, the development has moved in different directions in the different Slavic languages. Thus, the Bulgarian language and Russian language no longer use Tsar as an equivalent of the term emperor, imperator, as it exists in the West European tradition. Currently, the term Tsar refers to native sovereigns, ancient and biblical rulers, as well as monarchs in fairy tales and the like. The title of king is sometimes perceived as alien and is by some Russian speakers reserved for European royalty. Foreign monarchs of imperial status, both inside and outside of Europe, ancient as well as modern, are generally called imperator, rather than Tsar. In contrast, the Serbian and Ukrainian language translates emperor as Tsar and not as imperator, whereas the equivalent of king is used to designate monarchs of non-imperial status, Serbian as well as foreign ancient rulers, just like Latin rex. Biblical rulers in Serbian are called and in Croatian kralj. In the modern West Slavic languages and Slovene language, the use of the terms is nearly identical to the one in English and German. A king is designated with one term, an emperor is designated with another, derived from Caesar as in German, while the exotic term Tsar is reserved for the Bulgarian and Russian rulers. In the Polish language, however, Tsar is always used as imperator, never as king. Term Tsar is very often used to refer to the Russian rulers after Peter the Great. Bulgaria The sainted Boris I is sometimes retrospectively referred to as Tsar, because at his time Bulgaria was converted to Christianity. However, the title Tsar was actually adopted and used for the first time by his son Simeon I, following a makeshift imperial coronation performed by the Patriarch of Constantinople in 913. After an attempt by the Byzantine Empire to revoke this major diplomatic concession and a decade of intensive warfare, the imperial title of the Bulgarian ruler was recognized by the Byzantine government in 924 and again at the formal conclusion of peace in 927. Since in Byzantine political theory there was place for only two emperors, Eastern and Western, the Bulgarian ruler was crowned Basileus as a spiritual son of the Byzantine Basileus. Some of the earliest attested occurrences of the title O contraction zar from Tsar are found in the grave inscription of the Chug Ubaldia, Mostich, a contemporary of Simeon I and Peter I from Preslav. It has been hypothesized that Simeon's title was also recognized by a papal mission to Bulgaria in a shortly after 925, as a concession in exchange for a settlement in the Bulgarian-Croatian conflict or a possible attempt to return Bulgaria to union with Rome. Thus, in the later diplomatic correspondence conducted in 1199 to 1204 between the Bulgarian ruler Kaloyan and Pope Innocent III, Kaloyan, whose self-assumed Latin title was Imperator Bulgarorum Blocorum, claims that the imperial crowns of Simeon I, his son Peter I, and of Samuel were somehow derived from the papacy. The Pope, however, only speaks of reges, kings of Bulgaria in his replies, and eventually grants only the lesser title to Kaloyan, who nevertheless proceeds to thank the Pope for the imperial title conferred upon him. The title, later augmented with epithets and titles such as autocrat to reflect current Byzantine practice, was used by all of Simeon's successors until the complete conquest of Bulgaria by the Ottoman Empire in 1422. In Latin sources the Emperor of Bulgaria is sometimes designated Emperor of Zagora. Various additional epithets and descriptions apart, the official style read Emperor and autocrat of all Bulgarians and Greeks. During the 5-century period of Ottoman rule in Bulgaria, the Sultan was frequently referred to as Tsar. This may be related to the fact that he had claimed the legacy of the Byzantine Empire and to the fact that the Sultan was called Basileus in medieval Greek. After Bulgaria's liberation from the Ottomans in 1878, its new monarchs were at first autonomous princes, with the declaration of full independence. Ferdinand I of Bulgaria adopted the traditional title Tsar in 1908 and it was used until the abolition of the monarchy in 1946. However, these titles were not generally perceived as equivalents of emperor any longer. In the Bulgarian as in the Greek vernacular, the meaning of the title had still distinguished between the two concepts. Accordingly, while Ferdinand and his successors, Boris III and Simeon II, used the title of Tsar in Bulgarian, they used the title of king outside Bulgaria. In the same fashion, the modern rulers of Greece used the traditional title of Basileus in Greek and the title of king outside Greece, Kievan Rus. Tsar was used once by church officials of Kievan Rus in the naming of Yaroslav the Wise of Kyiv. This may be connected to Yaroslav's war against Byzantium and to his efforts to distance himself from Constantinople. However, other princes of Kievan Rus never styled themselves as Tsars. After the fall of Constantinople to the Crusaders and the Mongol invasion of Rus, the term Tsar was applied by some people of Kievan Rus to the Mongol overlords of the Rus principalities, Serbia. The title of Tsar was used officially by two monarchs, the previous monarchical title being that of king. In 1345, Stefan Dusan began to style himself Emperor of Serbs and Greeks, and was crowned as such in Skopje on Easter 1346 by the newly elevated Serbian Patriarch, alongside the Bulgarian Patriarch and Archbishop of Ohrid. On the same occasion, he had his wife Helena of Bulgaria crowned as Empress and his son associated in power as king. When Dusan died in 1355, his son Stefan V became the next emperor. The new emperor's uncle Simeon Duros contested the succession and claimed the same titles as a dynasty in Thessaly. After his death around 1370, he was succeeded in his claims by his son John Duros, who retired to a monastery in about 1373. With the extinction of the Nemanjić dynasty in Serbia in 1371, the imperial title became obsolete. The royal title was preserved by Vukašin Mrnjavčević, a Serbian ruler in Macedonia who had been associated by Stefan Duros. Several other Serbian rulers are known as Tsars, although they were never recognized as such. These include Tsar Lazar, Tsar Jovan Nenad and Tsar Stephen the Little. During the 5-century period of the Ottoman rule in Serbia, the Sultan was also frequently referred to as Tsar. For instance, in Serbian epic poetry, Russia, the first Russian ruler to openly break with the Khan of the Golden Horde, Mikhail of Tver, assumed the title of Basileus of Rus and Tsar, following his assertion of independence from the Khan and perhaps also his marriage to an heiress of the Byzantine Empire. Veliki Knyaz Ivan III of Muscovy started to use the title of Tsar regularly in diplomatic relations with the West. From about 1480, he is designated as Imperator in his Latin correspondence, as Kaiser in his correspondence with the Swedish regent, as Kejser in his correspondence with the Danish king, Teutonic Knights, and the Hanseatic League. Ivan's son Vasily III continued using these titles, as his Latin letters to Clement VII testify. Magnus Dux Basilius Dei Gratia Imperator A Dominator Totius Russia nec non Magnus Dux World Emirii, etc. Herberstein correctly observed that the titles of Kaiser and Imperator were attempts to render the Russian term Tsar into German and Latin, respectively. This was related to Russia's growing ambitions to become an Orthodox Third Rome after Constantinople had fallen. The Muscovite ruler was recognized as an emperor by Maximilian I, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, in 1514. However, the first Russian ruler to be formally crowned as Tsar of all Russia was Ivan IV, until then known as Grand Prince of all Russia. Some foreign ambassadors, namely Herberstein, Daniel Principakow and Just Joule, indicated that the word Tsar should not be translated as emperor, because it is applied by Russians to David, Solomon and other biblical kings, which are simple reges. On the other hand, Jacques Margaret, her bodyguard of false Demetrius I, argues that the title of Tsar is more honorable for Muscovites than Kaiser or king, exactly because it was God and not some earthly potentate, who ordained to apply it to David, Solomon, and other kings of Israel. Samuel Collins, a court physician to Tsar Alexis in 1659–66, styled the latter Great Emperor, commenting that as for the word Tsar, it has so near relation to Caesar that it may well be granted to signify emperor. The Russians would have it to be an higher title than king, and yet they call David Tsar and Dur kings, Kyrills, probably from Carolus Quintus, whose history they have among them. In 1610, Sigismund III of Poland manipulated his son's election as Tsar of Russia while Polish forces held Moscow during the time of troubles. Following the death of Boris Godunov, his election, which never resulted in his assumption of the Muscovite throne, was part of an unsuccessful plan by Sigismund to conquer all of Russia and convert the population to Catholicism. As a young man, Vladislav showed ability as a military leader in operations against Muscovy and the Ottoman Empire. In short, the Westerners were at a loss as to how the term zar should be translated properly. In 1670, Pope Clement X expressed doubts that it would be appropriate for him to address Alexis as zar, because the word is barbarian, and because it stands for an emperor, whereas there is only one emperor in the Christian world and he does not reside in Moscow. Reviewing the matter, Abbot Scarlatti opined that the term is not translatable and therefore may be used by the Pope without any harm. Paul Menesius, the Russian envoy in Vatican, seconded Scarlatti's opinion by saying that there is no adequate Latin translation for Tsar, as there is no translation for Shah or Sultan. In order to avoid such difficulties of translation and to assert his imperial ambitions more clearly, an edict of Peter I the Great raised Russia to an empire and decreed that the Latin-based title imperator should be used instead of Tsar. The title Tsar remained in common usage, and also officially as the designator of various titles signifying rule over various states absorbed by the Muscovite monarchy. In the 18th century, it was increasingly viewed as inferior to emperor, or highlighting the oriental side of the term. Upon annexing Crimea in 1783, Catherine the Great adopted the Hellenicized title of Tsaritsa of Tauric Chersonesos, rather than Tsaritsa of the Crimea as should have been expected. By 1815, when a large part of Poland was annexed, the title had clearly come to be interpreted in Russia as the equivalent of Polish Król king, and the Russian emperor assumed the title Tsar of Poland. Since the word Tsar remained the popular designation of the Russian ruler despite the official change of style, its transliteration of this title in foreign languages such as English is commonly used also, in fact chiefly, for the Russian emperors up to 1917. Full style of Russian sovereigns. The full title of Russian emperors started with "by the grace of God," emperor and autocrat of all the Russias, and went further to list all ruled territories. For example, according to the Article 59 of the Russian Constitution of the 23rd of April 1906, the full title of His Imperial Majesty is as follows: "We, by the grace of God, emperor and autocrat of all the Russias, of Moscow, Kiev, Vladimir, Novgorod, Tsar of Kazan, Tsar of Astrakhan, Tsar of Poland, Tsar of Siberia, Tsar of Tauric Chersonesos, Tsar of Georgia, Lord of Pskov and Grand Duke of Smolensk, Lithuania, Volhynia, Podolia and Finland, Prince of Estonia, Livonia, Courland and Semigaliya, Samogitia, Belostok, Karelia, Tver, Ugra, Perm, Vyatka, Bulgaria and other territories, Lord and Grand Duke of Nizhny Novgorod, Sovereign of Chernigov, Ryazan, Polotsk, Rostov, Yaroslavl, Beluzero, Udoria, Obdoria, Kondia, Vitebsk, Mstislavl, and all northern territories, Sovereign of Iberia, Kartalinia, and the Kabardinian lands and Armenian territories, hereditary lord and ruler of the Circassians and mountain princes and others, Lord of Turkestan, heir of Norway, Duke of Schleswig-Holstein, Stormarn, Dithmarschen, Oldenburg, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. For example, Nicholas II, the last Russian emperor, was titled as follows: Russian Latin transliteration Božímu prospešestvu Usheju milostiju my Nikolaevi Imperator ISAMODERSHETSVSEROSSIISKIY Moskovsky, Kievsky, Vladimirsky, Novogrodsky, Tsar Kazansky, Tsar Astrakansky, Tsar Polsky, Tsar Sibirsky, Tsar Khersonaty Tavricheskagard, Tsar Gruzinsky, Gosuda, Skovsky, I Veliky Knyaz, Smolensky, Litovsky, Vilinsky, Podolsky I Finlyansky, Knyaz, Esiliansky, Lifliansky, Kurliansky I Semigolsky, Samojitsky, Belostoksky, Koralsky, Tivasky, Yugorsky, Permsky, Vyatsky, Belgasky Ionik, Gosuda I Veliky Knyaz, Novgorod-Azovsky Ozemli, Chernigovsky, Ryazansky, Politsky, Rostovsky, Yaroslavsky, Belozovsky, Udorsky, Objorsky, Kondiarsky, Vitebsky, Mstislavsky I Vsey 7 years Strany Povlidal I, Gosuda Ivaskia, Kartalinskia I Kabadinskia Zemli I Oblasti Armenskia, Cherkassky I Gorsky Knyaz I Inik Nasledny Gosuda I Obladatel, Gosuda Turkstansky, Naslednik Norvezsky, Gertsog Slavik Golstansky, Stormansky, Ditmarsensky I Oldenburgsky, I Prochar. The subsidiary title of Tsar of Kazan proclaimed the chief Orthodox dynasty as successor-in-law to the mighty Islamic Khanate of Kazan, not maintaining its heathen title but christening it. It should also be noted that Khans of Kazan were mentioned in Russian chronicles such as Kazan Chronicle as Tsars of Kazan. The subsidiary title of Tsar of Siberia refers to the Tatar Khanate of Siberia, easily subdued in the early stages of the exploration and annexation of the larger eponymous region, most of it before inhabited by nomadic tribal people without a state in the European sense. The subsidiary title of Tsar-in-Chief of Transcaucasian Georgia is the continuation of a royal style of a native dynasty that had as such been recognized by Russia. The subsidiary title of Tsar of Poland demonstrates the Russian emperor's rule over the legally separate Polish kingdom, nominally in personal union with Russia, established by the Congress of Vienna in 1815, in a sense reviving the royal style of the pre-existent national kingdom of Poland. Internationally and in Poland, the Tsars were referred to as kings of Poland. In some cases, defined by the Code of Laws, the abbreviated imperial title was used. We, by the grace of God, Emperor and Autocrat of all the Russias, of Moscow, Kiev, Vladimir, Novgorod, Tsar of Kazan, Tsar of Astrakhan, Tsar of Poland, Tsar of Siberia, Tsar of Taurik Chersonesos, Tsar of Georgia, Lord of Pskov, and Grand Duke of Smolensk, Lithuania, Volhynia, Podolia, and Finland, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. Quote, in other cases, also defined by the Code of Laws, the short imperial title was used. We, by the grace of God, Emperor and Autocrat of all the Russias, Tsar of Poland, Grand Duke of Finland, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. Titles in the Russian royal imperial family. Tsaritsa is the term used for a queen, though in English contexts this seems invariably to be altered to Tsarina. In Imperial Russia, the official title was Empress. Tsaritsa could be either the ruler herself or the wife of the Tsar. The title of Tsaritsa is used in the same way in Bulgaria and Serbia. Zesarevich is the term for a male heir apparent. The full title was heir Zesarevich, informally abbreviated in Russia to the heir. Tsarevich was the term for the younger sons and grandsons of Tsaritsa prior to 1721. In older times the term was used in place of Zesarevich. After 1721 a son who was not an heir was formally called Veliky Knyaz. The latter title was also used for grandsons. Tsarevna was the term for a daughter and a granddaughter of a Tsaritsa prior to 1721. After 1721, the official title was Velikaya Knyazhnya, translated as Grand Duchess or Grand Princess. See also Grand Duchess for more details on the Velikaya Knyazhnya title. Tsarevna was the wife of the Tsarevich. Metaphorical uses. Like many lofty titles, e.g., Mughal Tsar has been used as a metaphor for positions of high authority in English since 1866, with a connotation of dictatorial powers and style fitting since autocrat was an official title of the Russian emperor. Similarly, Speaker of the House Thomas Reed was called Tsar for his dictatorial control of the House of Representatives in the 1880s and 1890s. In the United States and in the UK, the title za'ər is a slang term for certain high-level civil servants, such as the drug czar for the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, terrorism czar for a presidential advisor on terrorism policy, cybersecurity czar for the highest-ranking Department of Homeland Security official on computer security and information security policy, and war czar to oversee the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. More specifically, a czar refers to a sub-cabinet-level advisor within the executive branch of the U.S. government. One of the earliest known usages of the term was for Judge Kenneth or Mountain Landis, who was named Commissioner of Baseball, with broad powers to clean up the sport after it had been dirtied by the Black Sox scandal of 1919.